Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum viewers. I'm your host S.M. Hali, presenting another edition of Defense and Diplomacy. A year has gone by since the US Navy SEALs launched Operation Geronimo, in which they allegedly took out Osama bin Laden. In this year which has passed, there have been a number of events. There was an attack on the Pakistan Naval Air Base Mehran, in which we lost 2 of our maritime surveillance aircraft. And more importantly, there was an attack at the Pakistani army checkpost at Salala by NATO troops, in which something like 24 soldiers, including officers, were killed. And this has led to bad blood. Exactly on the anniversary, the first anniversary of Osama bin Laden's taking out, President Obama visited Kabul in a surprise visit and clinched a new strategic deal with Afghanistan. What are the implications and how do Pak-US relations stand today? To discuss that, we have in our studio today Lieutenant General Talat Masood, a very renowned defense analyst. Welcome, sir. And we have with us Ambassador Saeed Khalid, who, besides having represented Pakistan in a number of foreign capitals, has now become a prolific writer and an analyst. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
So how do you see this year that went by, sir, and do you think the Al-Qaeda's activities have been reduced?
Well, I think that as far as Al-Qaeda is concerned, undoubtedly, it was a huge setback for them, the way that Osama was killed and captured. But I think we also have to understand that the Al-Qaeda had already weakened much earlier because they were losing most of their top leaders, because Pakistan had been very, very active in getting hold of them and handing them over or dealing with it directly. At the same time, I think we also have to understand that Al-Qaeda was on the run, and even Osama bin Laden was not, truly speaking, really operational, or he was in a way hiding, and so were all other top Al-Qaeda leaders. But at the same time, their ideological and inspirational aspect of it continues to play a very important role, especially amongst those groups like the TTP or the Punjabi jihadis and so on, who want to sort of cling on to that ideology in order to leverage their own self. And at the same time, Al-Qaeda uses these groups as a franchise because they do not have that sort of a support which they had in the past. So they are relying on local jihadis.
Right. What is your opinion, sir? How has this year gone by, and do you think the Al-Qaeda has been weakened?
I certainly feel that Al-Qaeda's appeal is no longer what it was. And also we have to see how the people or the countries which are being targeted by Al-Qaeda, how they are reacting. And I am particularly interested in how Pakistan is reacting. And I feel that for once, Pakistan has taken a very unambiguous stand in countering Al-Qaeda and their associates in different ways, militarily, politically, philosophically, ideologically. So I think that as far as Pakistan is concerned, we have entered a new phase of our struggle against Al-Qaeda and their allies, and this phase may be very, very critical and very decisive. But I do want to respond to your question, and I would say that Al-Qaeda is transforming. They have now realized that they cannot militarily meet something like the superior technology of surveillance and of attacks, and that in order to keep the younger generation on board, they are now taking a more political kind of path, and they are trying to link somehow to the uprising in the Arab countries. It doesn't mean that they will give up their terrorist tactics. It will continue, but bringing in more political content.
Right. So your point is taken when you say that they are trying to link with the Arab Spring so-called the uprising in the various countries. But obviously, it is being taken with a pinch of salt because the youth has its own mind and it has its own momentum. But both of you, sir, I would like to draw your attention to this book I have just started reading, An Enemy We Created. It's authored by two very prominent writers. One of them is Alex van Leeuwen, who is of Dutch origin. The other is Felix Kuhn, who is of German origin. But both have accurate command over the language. And they say that this enemy was created by the USA, which of course the USA itself admits. But the point they are trying to make is that there is no merger between Taliban and Al-Qaeda, which was feared by many. What is your opinion, sir?
Well, of course, the Americans also today say the same, that the Al-Qaeda is different to Taliban. The only problem is that they have always maintained that. The only problem was that when Taliban, especially Mullah Omar, and continued to sort of insist that he will give sanctuary to Osama bin Laden and would not hand over, but would like to try Osama bin Laden within Afghanistan if evidence is provided. That led, and even today, that is the only reason why the Americans are prepared to talk to the Taliban. And although there has been not much substantial progress or significant progress in that endeavor, apart from certain meetings, but we, at least as of now, we do not know if there has been any substantial move. So I agree with the conclusions drawn by these two authors, but it is something which we already know, and Taliban are a different kettle of fish in the sense that they have their own aspirations, they have their own, they want to capture power. They have their own interpretation of Islam, which is, of course, from our perspective, fairly warped and, very extremist, very extremist, and are also not compromising in any sense. So there is hardly any tolerance. There is no respect for democracy, at least as of now, unless they decide to join the Afghanistan government and are prepared to accept its constitution.
The other aspect I would like to draw your attention to, Ambassador, and which you may feel with your previous experience having been in the Foreign Office, was that diplomatically Pakistan was attacked and isolated after this particular operation to take out Osama bin Laden. Pakistan was being ridiculed. In fact, Leon Panetta went to the extent of saying that either the ISI is incompetent or it was complicit in hiding this particular person.
You are right that in the immediate aftermath of the May 2 operation, Pakistan was maligned a lot. But over time, and I have seen some recent statements by the American senior, very high officials, saying that they have not found any proof that either Pakistan's political leadership or Pakistan's military leadership, they were aware of Osama's whereabouts. So I think that particular allegation has not stood the test of time. And even yesterday, the defense minister, he gave an interview, and he has repeated what Pakistan has said earlier and what also was
and this story
accepted.
was also published in the Washington Post.
Yes, it has been said earlier on also, but because of the anniversary, I think it was repeated that Pakistan provided some of the information which then led to his localization.
Right. So, General Talat Masood, I would like to solicit your opinion, sir, on the attack on Salalah checkpost. Of course, we don't want to repeat what has gone on, but the important aftermath of it is that Pakistan, of course, reacted very sharply, which it should have. Absolutely. And it is still waiting for an apology from the United States. And resultantly, the NATO supply route has been blocked, which Pakistan is not willing to start until there is an apology. And how do you look at this state of affairs, sir?
Well, I think it has been said that there has been a sort of a hold-up in the relationship, and at the moment it is suffering from a very serious stalemate. But as you are aware, both the countries need each other. And there is no doubt about it, at a time when the Americans are withdrawing, the Americans need Pakistani support. They need their logistics supply line to be revived, although they have alternates, but those alternatives are very expensive. Aside, I think it's very important that, for Pakistan as well, because Pakistan needs United States and the Western world, and it's not just a question of US, it's also a question of the entire NATO countries. So being an ally, we also have to continue supporting them in Afghanistan, especially when they are withdrawing, although there is a strategic partnership about which we may be able to talk later. I think it is in our interest, both economic as well as military, as well as political and diplomatic, to continue with the relationship. The thing is that how do we maintain that relationship? I think both need to move forward, and it doesn't mean that certain sad and tragic events have taken place. I think Americans need to apologize. We can find a way out of that as well. Not that we need their apology, but at the same time, we also need to revive the logistic supply line, less the carrying
but of course, respecting the sovereignty of Pakistan.
Yeah.
Ambassador, if you recall, sir, in my introduction, I mentioned about President Obama's surprise visit to Kabul. And the timing, of course, was exactly on the anniversary. But importantly, he clinched a deal, a strategic deal, which the general was just mentioning, with Afghanistan. Mr. Karzai had earlier been dragging his feet on it, but now both of them have signed it. Of course, it has to be ratified. The important thing is that this deal permits the United States to maintain its trainers and special forces for another 10 years, that is till 2024. What do you think will be the ramifications for the region?
Well, Mr. Hali, some days ago, it was said that whereas the broad agreement has been reached, there are some points which are still to be sorted out. And the most important point is about immunity to US personnel in Afghanistan. And over these 2 days, we have not heard anything about that, because that is a big sticking point. If you remember, after the massacre, after the shooting near Kandahar, the American sergeant who had done that, President Karzai had asked for his trial to be held in Afghanistan, and the Americans flew him out very quickly to avoid that possibility. So I think this is the most important point which needs to be resolved. And I have heard so far that Afghanistan does not want to give immunity to US personnel who will be posted in Afghanistan. How they are going to find, an agreement on that. It's a bit like Pakistan and the US and NATO finding an agreement on how NATO route can be revived.
Right.
It means that critical points have to be.
And talking about this particular pact, strategic pact, it has to be ratified by the Afghan parliament also. But
but I think the main thing about it, as I see it, is that there are two aspects to it. It's a very strong signal and is of significance to those who think that Americans would be leaving and the NATO would be leaving. So it looks as though this is a message that no, we are not going to leave, although we are withdrawing our forces. But the fact is that our presence would be there in terms of training, battalions or units. Then at the same time, we will also have those forces, special forces about which you mentioned, and they would be available in case the Afghans need them. So in a way, it would be a prop for the Afghan army and security forces, that they will not be left to themselves to be overwhelmed by the Taliban in case the Taliban assault becomes very strong. So that's one thing. The second thing is that they will also support them economically and financially. So there will be an assistance that will be continuing for years to come. So that is very necessary, because otherwise you would not be able to sustain an army as large as 250,000.
Right. Of course, the figures are still being debated. But Ambassador, I agree with what the General has just said, but you see one major stakeholder, which is the Taliban, and with whom negotiations are probably in progress, they apparently have not accepted it, because within hours of Obama's departure from the Bagram Air Base, there was a massive attack on the foreign compound and about 7 people were killed. So the Taliban are not likely to accept this kind of a strategic pact.
Yes, and this is going to go on. It will be a different phase in the sense that the United States and their allies, they will, pull out most of their troops. But the fight is going to go on. And although the statement which came out of Kabul, it spoke of training first and special operations in the second place, but we know that the second place is maybe more important. One thing is clear, that the American presence will be not what it was said to be. It won't be that ambitious, the bases won't be that big, and they are trying to bring it, downsize it to some kind of working arrangement which will be acceptable.
And even in his own address, President Obama said that we are not looking for permanent bases in Afghanistan. But let's come back to Pak-US relations, sir. We need to review, because the only entity which is gaining out of the trust deficit between US and Pakistan are the terrorists themselves, and we can't let them get stronger. What is your opinion, sir?
Absolutely. What happens is that when there is a vacuum, it's always filled by those forces which have been opposing them. And as you know, over a period of time, because there has been no decision taken on our side as well as on Americans, the space has been sort of filled by these very extremist groups, this Defiant Council, or whatever you call them, making statements, trying to make things difficult, and then everyone trying to sort of be on the right of everyone so as to gain some sort of a cheap populist support. So I think the government and the leadership has to now assert itself, which I think they will do, and from what one can make out of the recent meetings that are taking place, that they are going to take a decision in which they are going to hopefully revive the logistic supply line or the ground communications. And at the same time, I think we may hope that the Americans, and I think it would be very right on our part to expect that the Americans will reciprocate by a sort of an apology from their side.
Right. But you see, so more importantly, we need to look at the way forward. The Bonn conference took place December 5th last year. Pakistan boycotted it because of the NATO attack, which we just talked about. The Chicago conference is going to be held this month. Some quarters in Pakistan are saying that we should boycott that too, unless the US apologizes. What is your opinion, sir?
I think that diplomacy means to look for a workable, solution. So I will cite the example of negotiations between the Americans and the Afghans, which have finally led to an agreement, a mutually acceptable agreement, so that President Obama could fly to Kabul and then, sign that document. I think that the same principle should apply to negotiations between Pakistan and the United States, that both may have taken their maximalist positions, but it is time now to agree on a workable, formula. And I would go to the extent that Pakistan should make an announcement about restoring NATO route and say the details are being worked out. And then you proceed from there. Means you can change the mood from negative to positive. And similarly, the Americans also can make a gesture which brings positivity into the present, rather tense kind of atmosphere.
Right. That was the diplomatic front. How do you look at it from the military front, sir?
Military front also, it's extremely important to continue with the cooperation at the intelligence level, at the operational level, because the troops are going to stay till 2014 and even beyond that as far as the Afghans are concerned. So we need to continue to cooperate. So I think from the military point also it's very important. And as you rightly mentioned, the Chicago conference is coming maybe 21st of May. So we have a small window here, and it would be very important that Pakistan also should attend that, because Pakistan does not want to be isolated or stay away at a time, and it wants to play a role, a positive role, as the ambassador was saying, in Afghanistan. And so I think it's important from every point of view, from ours as well as the Americans, to sort of move forward and then take steps simultaneously, so that one does not feel that, you know, it has been let down, or the militant elements do not exploit it, or the radical elements, that the government is weak.
Right. Your final comment, sir.
Well, I mean, with humility, I would disagree with General Saab that Pakistan's presence at the summit is not of that high importance. What is more important is what signal we can give. We can do that without going to Chicago. We can do that in Chicago, because let's not forget that Chicago is a milestone where NATO and the United States and other NATO allies, they will announce their plans, you know, for the future in Afghanistan.
But when you talk about that, sir, let's not forget that in the Bonn conference, the Chinese and the Iranians, they expressed their reservations of any solution coming from a third country in Afghanistan other than involving the immediate neighbors.
Yes, of course. One second. I think that
very briefly, sir, we are running out of time.
I think the time frame is very short between now and Chicago. These things have to go on beyond Chicago.
Okay. So viewers, with that we come to the end of this very interesting discussion, because we notice not only that our very eminent panelists pointed out that this particular year after the assassination or taking out of Osama bin Laden was tumultuous. A number of events took place, including the Mehran attack, including the Salalah attack. The trust deficit between Pakistan and the US unfortunately grew because Pakistan boycotted the Bonn conference. But Pakistan and the US are back on the negotiation table. President Obama has clinched a very important strategic pact with the Afghans, but we in particular need to go forward, because we cannot have animosity or hostility between erstwhile allies, because the only people who gain from this are the terrorists, and we do not want terrorism to prevail. Instead, we want to crush it. I would like to thank you, Lieutenant General Talat Masood and Ambassador Saeed Khalid.
Pleasure.
Viewers, keep watching us and send us your comments. Hope to see you next week, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.